RLTK Real Talk Phoenix, Jordan here real quick. We got a special guest here, super stoked and excited for it, none other than my man Dre Harris, the mastermind behind everything we're doing right now. He's going to drop some serious knowledge on us today.
Yep, so on episode 19, maybe the Gen Z in your life doesn't need to go to high school for 4 years. What? And maybe they should go and start a business instead.
What's going on, everybody? Episode 19.
What is up, RLTK Real Talk Phoenix. Special guest today that we are exceptionally hyper about today.
Yeah, a little hyper.
I'm usually not very hyper. I'm quite stoic, right? But today I'm actually slightly excited.
Yeah.
Turn up.
Yeah,
and the reason is because
we got our boy Dre Harris in here. He is not only a great businessman here in the Valley, but he's a close personal friend. And we just want to give a little bit of a warning for some of our audience. We have talked to Dre before this.
Precursor.
Yes, Dre has a bit of a checkered past, and he has a bit of a checkered tongue because of that. So we're going to ask him to keep it PG for us this morning. I know we got a lot of spiritual people that follow us on this podcast, religious folk, and we love our religious folk, but we got a lot of non-religious folk out there and people of different religions following us for our wholesome content. So we're going to ask Dre to keep it pretty wholesome. Can you keep it PG-13 this morning, my friend?
Yeah, we're going to try. So let's see what happens.
Yeah. So anyways, we got our boy Dre Harris. He runs a marketing company called doesnt Consulting, and we're going to get into a little bit of that later on. But just want to introduce the homie and give him a chance to tell us.
And just to give a little precursor
some
to this
story,
it's important. So you guys would have noticed that Real Talk has made a shift in the past year in terms of how it's approaching what it does and the content that we're putting out, the media we're producing, and what we're trying to do at scale. And that's in large part to this man. So if you're thinking about doing anything similar, if you're thinking about how you can improve what you're doing with your business, or you're thinking about starting one, or you're trying to help young people start one, and you've got dreams and passions, like this podcast is for you.
Absolutely.
Bet. So you want me to introduce myself?
Do it.
Bet.
Yes,
so Dre
sir.
Harris, a.k.a. Doulash Dre. Word is bond. Right hand to God. So
Clip the microphone, Dre.
Yeah. Did I just clip?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, my bad. Let me tell you, I guess, a little bit of background about me. So you want me to get into that a little bit?
Let's do it. What is your story is the first question, so get after it.
Got it. So first, my background, definitely checkered, like John said. I grew up not in like a super wholesome environment. Mom was a drug addict. Got introduced to drugs from my dad, who was a drug addict. Divorced when I was 2. Ended up going with my mom and my little sister. Didn't see my dad. He was in and out of my life growing up. He was also in and out of incarceration. And so I grew up, in the jungle, if you will. I definitely was in a rough environment growing up, learned how to survive. And I like to tell people, I learned how to grow up fast, but I didn't learn how to become a man, right? And so learning how to grow up quickly and survive and learning how to be a man is very different.
Yeah,
and so left home when I was 15, ventured out, lived like a degenerate for a long time. And
how's that going for you? Have you reformed your ways yet there, my friend?
Man, God is good.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, when I was 21, got my whole life wrecked by Jesus and flipped my whole world upside down. And so
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, I think we'll get into it some more later on, but I'm definitely not where I am today because I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps and just like figured out how to do life well, right? I had a lot of help along the way. And
man,
so
that's great.
Yeah, it'd be good to get into that later.
Yeah, for sure. So we want to talk a little bit about what you're doing right now specifically. I had mentioned dousnt Consulting earlier, and like Jordan said, it's really helped us to take our organization to the next level. So could you get into some of that for our audience this morning?
Yeah, so a little bit of background on that. I used to work for in corporate America for several years. I worked there. And I did well, had the 401k matching, did all that stuff. But I got given a book by a good friend of mine called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And whether you agree with everything that's in it or not, it was something for me that put language to a lot of the internal struggle and turmoil that I had felt working in the corporate context, right?
What was it specifically that you remember just resonating from that book?
Yeah, specifically, I saw someone saying that all of the internal tensions that you've had about feeling like you're stuck in a creative box, You have no control over your like finances, really. You pay the highest amount in taxes that employees do, and you don't own, right? Yeah. And so your time is controlled, and you're exchanging time for money. And so all of that stuff, hit me.
Gotcha.
And on top of that, I had been going through just kind of some moral struggles working in the context that I worked in, and whether it was the right place for me to be. Yeah. And so,
what do you mean by that, moral?
Yeah. So,
I mean,
all right.
Not to put you on the spot, but just
good.
For the sake of our audience, they hear this, they think, more, what's this guy talking about? Like, this is bigger than just.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I worked at a place that rhymes with Hell's Cargo.
Okay.
Not to say no names, right? And I'm sure most of us have heard, right, what has happened in the banking world. Absolutely. And what happened several years back. And so basically I found myself saying, hey, I had 6 jobs when I first got saved. First year I became a believer. I went and got 6 jobs the same year. Okay. I was working seasonal jobs, trying to figure out like, how do I go and, find something that's above board that I can do for a long time. Right. Because my background was, I knew how to make money. I just didn't know how to make it legitimately.
Right.
And so, and so the Lord had saved me, and I'm like, all right, bet. So let me figure out how to, like, I need to become a man. Right. And I need to go and get a job and pay taxes and make money and that kind of thing. And so I went and got a bunch of jobs that first year. And then eventually I ended up going to a Starbucks, working there. That was a great experience. First job I ever had, having benefits. And then a friend of a friend got me connected, and I got a bank job. Right. And so I'm working at the bank, and I'm there for several years, doing well, making bonuses, doing the whole 9. But something in me was like, man, I feel like the pressure to sell and the pressure to hit certain numbers and metrics had me showing up at church every Sunday feeling like I've been toting this line of and living in this gray area, asking myself, man, have I been a liar all week?
Dang.
Have I been telling people the truth? Did they
so
really?
That's what you meant by the moral aspect of what you were doing.
Absolutely. And so it got to a point for me where I said, hey, you know what, if it's not actually really good for people, and this is important because I think this is going to come up as we talk more about Gen Z on this particular podcast episode. But I had to decide to make a morally courageous choice. And so I go to my manager and I tell him, hey, I can't keep showing up every day to work feeling like I'm not telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help me God kind of thing, right? I feel like I'm giving half truths because of the pressure to meet certain numbers and metrics. And so I'm done.
And so basically what you were doing was trying to get people loans or money that probably shouldn't have been getting it, right?
Right.
That's
and I mean,
the idea.
I wasn't opening up credit cards and people's names that didn't know about it or checking
that
accounts
happens.
Or whatever. But it happened, right?
Yeah.
But I was still giving people limited information.
Got you.
Right. And so they weren't able to make the most educated and informed decisions. Right. And in some cases, I knew that the person sitting across from me didn't need this thing. And actually that they shouldn't actually have this credit card.
But you needed to make a sale.
But I needed to be able to make a sale. And so my financial livelihood was ultimately made contingent on whether I was willing to do things that were at best very gray and at worst unethical.
Wow.
And so
you had to be okay with that to stay in that.
And so I decided, hey, I'm going to go to my boss and let him know I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done. And so if it's not actually good for people, and if it's not something that is really going to generate revenue for the bank, if it's not the right thing to do, I'm not doing it. Right. And so, and I was a beast when it came to sales, right? I excelled in that environment. And so numbers dropped for the whole branch.
Yeah.
Thankfully, my boss actually said, you know what, you coming to me about this, and saying this, I recognize that this is actually what we should be doing across the district. What we should be doing across the entire national footprint is taking the stance that you've taken to do the right thing. And so he had my back, and we got a lot of heat from up top, right? Wow. And so there were days where I'm like, man, how long is this going to last?
Yeah.
How long am I going to be able to do this? And thankfully, some doors opened up. I was able to move to a different department within the organization, got out of the retail side, and then that same manager and a couple other people actually ended up coming with me over there. And what was crazy about it was less than maybe 6-7 months after I had made that choice, all of the ish hit the fan, right? You had the big national scandal that happened, right? You got CEOs getting fired.
So you were out in front of that.
I was in front of it, not knowing that it was about to be as big of a deal as it was, right? This was like a huge issue of like ethical
boundaries.
Yeah, like I mean, they crossed some major boundaries, right?
Yeah.
They broke the law, right? They lied and cheated.
And that corruption seems like it was coming from the top down.
Absolutely. And so it was even more validating for me, right? That you doing the right thing is always the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's really indicative of Gen Z. I've read several articles, talked to several students on campus at the clubs that we have, and you're absolutely right, man. I think that's one thing that's a demarcation line between, let's say, millennials and Gen Z. Millennials seem to be like, hey, they change jobs quicker for advantage. That was what was different because people before stayed in positions longer and they built their way up. Millennials job hopped, right? But with Gen Z, they stay in the same place because they want that stability, but they also want to ensure the morality of the situation.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that's it's interesting. I guess you technically are behaving like a Gen Zer, but this is really kind of what we want to talk about today is just like how to influence Gen Z. I'm sure you've got Gen Z employees or people that you've worked with before where you've got plenty of stories on that. But would you say that's the case? That's kind of a core value for the generation?
100%. And so, yeah, and I know we're going to hit on this more in one of our questions in particular, but up front, I'll say this, that the big questions that we weren't willing to ask at one point in time, they're asking.
Yeah, that's right.
And the questions that we were willing to ask but not take any action on, they're willing to take action.
Right.
And so we are entering something new for sure.
Yeah, man, that's good.
Yeah.
And I'd say probably social media, the internet, all these digital platforms are really giving them a voice.
Absolutely.
Helping them to see that they don't have to kind of sit there. I think that's generations past. We felt kind of hopeless. We had to go with the flow, pay our dues, stay in a place for a while, and then work our way up to have a voice. Whereas with social media and platforms
absolutely. And
easier
than ever before, building a personal brand, being able to have a voice on social, like the days of the old white gray-haired men in the ivory tower ruling the world.
Yeah.
It's just not the way that it is anymore.
I mean, these things are like the great equalizer, aren't they? And
Absolutely.
That's really kind of what your business is about, is helping people have a voice in that way through social, through digital platforms.
Yep. And I mean, billions and billions of people, including cats in the hood, have cell phones.
Wow.
And so if you have a cell phone and you have access to the internet or free Wi-Fi somewhere, you can absolutely change your entire life. You just got to be shown how to leverage the power of what you have.
Could you give us, did you want to, I was going to say, give us an example of that. Yeah.
Drop some knowledge on us.
I'm a young cat in the hood. I hear you say that.
So check this out. So let's say you're a young guy and you have a knack for taking cool photos.
Okay.
Right? And you have a camera right on your phone. Right.
Okay.
And what's that saying of like the best camera is the one you have, right? What social media allows you to do is get on Instagram, send a DM to 1,000 businesses.
Wow.
And say, hey, I will come and I will take photos for you for free. You have Snapseed on your phone, which is an app that you can use and edit raw images right on your phone and make them look dope. And oftentimes, like if you guys ever get on YouTube and you see like videos or photos that were taken with an iPhone or a super expensive camera,
they look the same.
Like, and unless you're like some like genius, right, or brilliant filmmaker or photographer, for the average person,
there's people shooting movies with iPhones now.
Right. And so you have no idea what the difference is between those things. But what social media allows you to do is say, hey, I'm going to hit up all of these businesses and say, hey, I would love to come and take photos for you. And even if you said, hey, I want to come and do it for free, and if you like it, then let me shoot all of your events. Right. And so social media gives you access is the big thing. And then the other thing is, and I've talked about this for a long time, what people, especially in an urban context, who come from the places where I come from need is they need education, they need access, and they need opportunity. And when I say education, I don't mean typical, let's,
4 years.
Exactly. Have them go to college, get into a bunch of debt, just to go get a job that didn't require them to have the degree anyways, right? I was sitting next to people when I was at the bank who were making the same amount of money I was making, and they were getting master's degrees and had $80,000 in student loan debt.
Yeah. So
And
basically,
I have a GED, by the way.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is some of these young cats, they just get on YouTube, and instead of watching mind-melting dumb videos, they'd watch something that would help enrich them, teach them business principles, whatever.
I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, decided I can't stay in this corporate context anymore. I can't deal with the moral issues that I'm having here anymore. I got to make an even further step, and I got to get out of this context, and I'm going to go figure out how to do my own thing, right? And so while my wife's pregnant with our first kid,
oh my gosh,
I'm like, hey, babe, I'm quitting my job.
How'd she handle that?
It was like a little.
Y'all are still married, so that says something.
She still loves me, right? And so I'm like, hey, I got to leave. I got to go do this. And so I got on YouTube, and I said, I want to figure out how to dive into the world of marketing, the world of brand. Wow. And I want to figure this out. And so, I've watched thousands of hours of YouTube videos, right? But you can do that. I was just talking to a Gen Zer the other day, and I was like, hey, how'd you learn how to work on cars? Because he's building this Porsche and put in like a special engine in it and all this stuff, right?
Wow.
And I'm like, how'd you learn that? He was like, I was working in the garage with my dad. And then I go, yeah, you probably watch YouTube, huh? And he was like, man, I watched a lot of YouTube.
Wow.
You can learn almost anything off of YouTube, right?
Man.
And I get it. Like, you don't want someone doing heart surgery on you who learned it from YouTube, right? But there are a ridiculous amount of things that you can Google and then you can go on YouTube and find and be able to teach yourself. And so if you have a cell phone and you have access to Wi-Fi at a coffee shop, you can go and do some phenomenal things.
Man, that's such great information. Wow.
So how has being in business changed your life?
Yes. So, man, the biggest thing that I would tell you is, while I understand that from a worldview perspective, I think that work is cursed, right? It's intended to be difficult now to make a living and to do these things. And I hope one day for the kind of rest that we get when we get to be with the Lord. But I was not happy before. And so when I got the opportunity to be able to go and branch out and say, hey, I'm going to start my own thing, I realized that you can actually be someone who is tremendously joy-filled and happy with your vocation. And before, it was a grind. I got to wake up every day. I got to get to this bank job. I got to put in this time. You know what I'm saying? And and there's no wonder, how many hours do people actually work at their corporate jobs during the day? What is they were talking about how
it's like 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4 hours basically.
The rest of the time is shooting the breeze.
Right. And how much time is actually wasted being spent by people on social media or surfing the internet or doing whatever, right? And so it's not satisfying and fulfilling. The system that we have in place and this pumping out workers and getting people to sit in cubicles, it's anti-human nature, and it's been disconnected from what people really want for a long time.
Right.
But oftentimes folks, they don't know any different. And so sometimes it's an issue of ignorance, right? So they're not educated on what's possible and what's available. The other thing is they're afraid, right? And the whole world is telling you, go the safe route.
Don't do that.
Yep. Don't do that. Don't take risks. Don't all of those things. But it's ridiculous. Just like them telling you that you need to know what you want to do for the rest of your life when you're 18.
Right.
How's
so
that
have you
make
figured
any
it
sense?
out yet?
I was still eating candy bars for breakfast. I didn't eat real food until I got married.
It's true.
And you want me to figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of my life?
Though.
Yeah, to some degree. No, absolutely. So business has definitely changed my world in that it has really expanded my horizons. It's made me recognize that you can, in fact, be happy doing something and you can do good and make money. And I think one of the big things, too, for me is I've always been a more radical guy. I've always been a break the mold kind of guy. Most people I feel like I spend time with haven't quite had a Dre kind of dude that they spend a lot of time with in their life. And so what's awesome about the rule breakers, the oddballs, the risk takers, the radicals that are out there, rather than trying to stuff them into this cubicle box, entrepreneurship says, we'll take all of who you are. We'll take everything. You actually can come and be crazy and build a brand here. You can be a risk taker. You can be bold. You can be courageous. You can be loud. Man, and this is an arena where you can actually thrive if you do those things.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was also hey, I love the Lord. I don't think I should be anybody's pastor. I think I should be a good member of a local church, and where I don't feel like I should be shepherding people. I think that I found in entrepreneurship that it's a place where all of Dre can be utilized and in full effect and be beneficial for both God's glory and for the good of people. So,
man, that's really cool.
Yeah, that is good. So what do you see as we kind of transition for our influencers out there that are listening to the podcast, maybe even some Gen Zers? What do you see coming down the pipeline from Gen Z when it comes to business? What should we be aware of? What should we be paying attention to?
Yes. So that's good. And so to hit on kind of where we were going earlier. Yeah. So this old, out of touch, archaic system, right? Even and listen to me when I say this. If you think that high school is a necessity, that you have to go through even 4 years, I'm not even talking about college. You think you have to go through 4 years of high school in order to become successful? That's a lie. Okay. Now I understand a lot of jobs are going to require you to have a GED at least, right?
You're going to need to unpack that a little bit because you just hurt some people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so here's the reality, right? Ask me how many times I use geometry and algebra in my day-to-day life.
How many times, Dre?
Never, ever. And I run a business. Right? The other day, I'm hanging out with my guy, John Eisenring here, right? You're upstairs. Your son's downstairs.
Yep.
Doing math homework.
That was hilarious.
Can't figure out what the answer to a particular problem is, right?
Very
Not
true.
for a lack of trying. I see him sneak over by the Alexa, and he goes, "Yo, Alexa, how many?"
He said it just like that too. Yo,
right? Whatever it was, like
he thinks he's a little gangster.
Yeah.
Like talking to some
and
girl
it was
on the phone or something.
Yo,
right. Yes. And so, and he asks Alexa his math problem. You know what I mean? Something to do with pints or something like that.
Yeah.
And she spits the answer out for him. And you see him just writing down, right away. And he's like, I mean, they just expect me to just know all this stuff off the top of my head. And I'm like, this is brilliant because the reality is we live in a different world now. Right? When I need to know something complicated as far as math goes, I just go Google the answer.
Or ask Siri. Or
right.
Yeah.
And in a calculator or whatever.
Absolutely. And then now some people can say, well, that's a lazy way of living, right? Or how are you going to teach them critical skills, right? Believe me, I'm an extremely critical thinker. Dre Harris does not lack confidence when it comes to my ability to think well. And guess what? Math is not why I do.
Right.
Knowing how to do conversion metrics is not why I'm confident about how to think critically.
I think that's most people, man.
Absolutely. And my critical thinking has come overwhelmingly from actually asking the bigger, larger, deeper questions about life than trying to figure out how to do a high school math problem.
Man, that's so good.
And so my business partner, Dominique, shout out to Dom.
Hey.
She went to school for maybe her first or second year of high school and then went and got her GED because she was like, I'm bored with this.
Right.
I'm out. And now she's 25 years old, had a GED. She's got 2 children, owns her own house, is building a business with me, was already successful in the corporate America, has done real estate investing in the whole nine. A GED, ladies and gentlemen. The internet is, in fact, a great equalizer. And so stop trying to pump these Gen Zers through the same old system that was already disconnected for millennials.
Sure.
Right? It's already out of date for us. And so people, I feel like they see, hey, like another example, right? I'm talking to a kid the other day named Jack. Shout out to Jack, right? Goes to ASU. Told me, I said, hey, what are you getting your degree in, right? And I'll tell you what he's getting his degree in a minute. But I asked him, hey, are you very entrepreneurial? You know what I mean? And so he was like, yeah, when I was young, I got basically invited to serve food at like a company party kind of thing. And then I started making business cards and reaching out to places that were doing company parties and going to serve them food at those places. And so the dude's been entrepreneurial already. Now he's going to ASU at WP Carey, getting a degree in entrepreneurship.
Wow.
So you're going to sit in a classroom and you're going to expect people, oftentimes, who have built no business ever,
right,
but who got a degree, right, and who played that tenured track game, and you're going to expect those people to teach you what really only getting in the trenches
right
is going to teach you. I don't care how many classes you take on micro and macroeconomics. It doesn't mean nothing, right?
Well, unless you want to work for corporate America, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's an option, right?
Yeah.
But I cannot tell you the amount of people that work in corporate America because it's safe.
Yep.
Because that's what they were told to do.
Yep.
Because they don't want their degree to be for nothing, and they're super unhappy.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So what you're proposing is that we flip education on its head, because what we've been told for so long is that anybody who doesn't get an education is the exception.
Yep.
And what we're saying is that the people who don't get an education should actually be the rule, and the people that do should be the exception.
And actually, we're talking about something even more fundamentally different than that.
Okay.
This perception that education can only look a certain way.
Right.
I'm tremendously educated. I've read probably more books than the average seminary student.
Yeah. That was kind of Kanye West was out in front of this with College Dropout, if we think about it. You know what I mean?
And he's not the only one, right?
Yeah.
And there's other people that are out there. But
Yeah.
in all reality, if you're Gen
But he
Zer,
popularized that notion in a way that I remember when that album dropped, people were scared their kids were going to not go to college, you know.
I get it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
And
there's
so-
merit to the argument.
Right. And I'm not walking around over here like, dude, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, right? I'm trying to give people real life examples that there are people like me, and that your Gen Zer might be a young person who has a lot of Dre kind of tendency
I
to
know a
them.
young girl right now who literally dropped out of school just to get her GED.
Yes.
And so, interesting question. What would you say an influencer, parent, teacher, coach should be looking out for? Somebody who influences young people and they see that thing on the inside of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like,
How do you nurture
it might
that?
not be a bad idea for you to go get your GED so you have it.
Yes.
And then go pursue whatever it is you're trying to pursue, because you're kind of wasting your time right now.
And what you just said is exactly what I would tell an influencer to tell the Gen Zers in their life is, if you know a Gen Zer and they don't like school, guess what? They're not going to get to college and probably
And start
magically
liking
just love school all of a sudden when they hated it in high school. And now you have them go into an environment where the stakes are even higher, and where they can get into debt.
Yes.
You know, and I get it. If my son wants to go to school to become a doctor, you know, a surgeon, an architect.
I want those guys having a degree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I get that. You know, you want to become a nurse or whatever the case is. Not to say that there's not any reform that might need to take place even in how those educational tracks run, right? But, you know, if he wants to go do that, I get it, right? But if you want to get a philosophy degree or a European art history
so you can work at Starbucks.
Right, so that you can go work at a coffee shop.
I always knew those baristas were really smart.
Give me a break. You know what I mean?
Let's discuss Nietzsche over some coffee.
Right. Wow. And so what I would tell influencers is understand who these kids are that are in front of you. Recognize who they are. And be the wind under their sails.
Man, that's so good.
Don't hold them back and make them go a route that you didn't even like going.
I think that's a big generational difference.
Yep.
You know, I think older leaders before, when I think about myself generationally, I think that the concept, like I was saying earlier, it was a pay your dues concept.
Yep.
Right? And so I think what's difficult for leaders right now is seeing Gen Z make their own way and having the tools to do it and not waiting on anyone. And I think older generations who kind of are still asking, let's say the millennials underneath them, to pay their dues because they're not done running their race yet.
Right.
The Gen Zers are saying, deuces, I'm rewriting the whole game. And it really makes us think about those who are in position. Like, we're going to be the senior leaders at some point, right? Like the Gen Xers and the millennials. And what I hear you saying, that's a fundamentally different approach to leading people under you.
Who knows?
Right.
That's very true.
And I think the reality is this, is that if you're a Gen Xer, if you're a millennial, the world that you live in the future is not going to be ultimately shaped by you.
That's right.
It's going to be shaped by Gen Zers.
Mm-hmm. And
these
the
kids are appropriating technology.
Nobody's ready for that yet.
Right?
I know.
And so, you know, they're appropriating technology at a faster rate. Right? My son is 2 years old. He's sitting in the car the other day talking about, hey, Siri, play Boat. He wants her Siri to play this boat song that my wife sings to him at nighttime before he goes to bed, right? He doesn't know a world without technology, and it's moving way fast.
Yep.
Way
Basically,
fast.
That's an alpha, by the way, for any of you that are wondering.
Yeah.
We doing some research, you know, in a good old great place to do research called Reddit.
Yes.
And it's a great place to do research.
If you have the courage to actually go to Reddit.
whatever they really want to say. Like
on Reddit.
Really want to say. And there's a Gen Z strand, and these people are savages.
Absolutely.
But anyways, they had this post, and they were talking about what makes them Gen Z, the fact that they don't have any emotional connection or real historical connection in their own mind to 9/11.
Right.
And then what they talked about for this group of people that's coming after them that they called alphas, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
Is basically this generation that was born when the iPhone was already in existence in a heavy part of society. And I think it's interesting. I thought, maybe they're calling them alphas because when you start a program or start a business, you have an alpha process and then you have a beta process.
Right.
So alpha is like the beginning stages where you're building everything out, designing everything, and you're getting your initial interest groups and things of that nature. And so I thought, that's crazy.
I've also heard Gen Z.
So who knows what they're going to call the next generation?
Yeah, I've heard them called the builders, right? And a lot of people are comparing them to the World War II generation. They talk about this concept called the fourth turning generationally. We were watching this on a documentary last night. And what it talks about is every generation has an opportunity to kind of bring about the change in its generation. Yeah. And if that gets skipped over, it takes about 4 generations for things to kind of come to a head.
Wow.
Right. And so they were saying that if it doesn't turn, then an inspirational leader kind of generally, historically, when you look back over it, emerges who forces the change.
Wow.
Interesting. So if you see a lot of what's happening right now with the Trump presidency, what do you see? The erosion of institutionalism.
Absolutely.
And what do you see Gen Zers doing with their digital platforms?
Yep. And check this
Why
out.
do I have to watch television, CBS, ABC, Fox, when I can make my own channel?
Hey, that's real. And so check this out. This is important, too, to the question that you asked about what I would say to influencers, right? A part of, I think, being a person who cares about all the things. I care about all the things, right? I care about truth. I'm not a subjectivist. I don't think that you can't know or any of that stuff, right? I think that there is real truth to be had in the world and that we should care to live in accordance with what is right and good and admirable.
Wait, can I pause you?
Yes.
So one of those things that you're talking about, and I know you're a real religious guy, but for some of our audience who isn't religious, but they resonate with what you're saying, like what are some of those wholesome truths or these truths that you're talking about, right?
Absolutely.
So we kind of disagree over truth, but I think appreciating life is one truth that regardless of your religion, like what are some of the things that you would hit on that would be common things in this truth thing you're talking about?
Easy. Honesty.
Okay.
Compassion.
Right.
Love for people. Right. No one needs to be convinced that these are basic
religion
fundamental things, right, that are there. Now, why they're there in people, right? Is it evolution? Did God put them there? All that kind of stuff. We can debate about those things, right? I'm down to do that. We can put the big guns out on the table for whoever wants to get it. But the reality is this, is that we all know, right, that we ought to care about people. Wanting to alleviate the suffering of people who are suffering, especially people who are suffering at the hands of people that are mistreating them, right? When folks could stop that kind of thing. So that's what I'm talking about is we need to care about morality. We need to care about what's right and good and true and beautiful. And so with that being the case though, right, most people that I interact with, right, they are spending very little time thinking about all types of things. And so, for instance, I'm just watching, and I'm the guy who watches a documentary, it wrecks my whole life, and then I try to figure out what can I do about this.
Right.
Okay. And that's what led me from saying, hey, I only want to build this for-profit business now. And I know we didn't talk about it at the beginning, but to saying, hey, no, I'm going to go start a nonprofit and help nonprofits, right? And it's my experience with the world that is really driving that. My care to love people like I love myself, right? And I know that that's in there in people, but it gets snuffed out early on. And so I'm watching this documentary, though, about how 7 to 9% of plastics get recycled, right? That's it. And how the whole recycling sort of movement was started by the same people who created the plastics problem to begin with.
The oil and gas industry.
The big oil and gas industry. And so you got these guys coming, creating a problem, saying, oh, here's the solution everyone could buy into so that we can keep perpetuating this problem that's destroying stuff, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not like some the super climate change guy. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm not a tree hugger, any of that kind of stuff. But common sense says I'd like to not eat sushi and eat plastic with it.
Right, exactly.
That can't be good, right? And so having a son, It'll give you a different perspective on
True.
the world that they're going to inherit going forward, right? And so, but my point though in saying that is I'm watching that documentary and I'm like, man, maybe I should really start thinking about not using single-use plastics, you know? And then also in it, you see there's a place in Texas where you got all of these oil companies all around, these refineries, and they're producing plastics and all type of stuff. And right in the middle of it is the hood. And they bought the property all around it because it was cheap real estate. But now you got the hood right in the middle, and these people are getting sick and suffering.
No one cares about
and nobody cares.
Yeah.
And no one cares, right? And so I say all that to say this. The thing that I'm probably the most excited about Real Talk, and the thing that I'm the most excited about Gen Zers, is that they're coming to the table saying, we're not going to be quiet. We're going to ask the hard questions, and we're going to force people to take action. You can't sit in the middle. You can't just be ignorant anymore. You can't say, well, it's too hard or it's too inconvenient.
Right.
They're going to push you to make a choice, pick a side, and then to be held accountable for the decisions that you make.
And explain yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Have a reason.
Yeah.
Don't just say, well, it's a slippery slope. It's hard. Well, how, no, let's make real substantive change. And so what I'm excited about is to see how that plays itself out. And I think that there's going to be good and bad that comes with that, right?
For sure.
And there's going to be a lot of challenges that we face. But the last thing that they need is our influencers in their life discouraging them from asking the hard questions and taking real action.
Yeah. And that's the thing I've seen. We've been hearkening back to this about generations before and how they treated, the younger generations under them.
Yep.
And this is the thing that I'm really seeing, man. It's kind of this, we're going to bring the younger generation up with us. Now, I think the converse to that, like the danger of that would be, and we're already seeing this, Gen Z doesn't respect authority the same way generations in the past did. If you were an authority figure.
Not really at all.
Yeah. Exactly. And so this is really the reason for the Real Talk platform, because parents have thought traditionally, let's just keep on doing it the way I was raised. This generation's asking questions. And if you can't answer those questions, they're going to find someone who can answer the question. They'll find it online.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's to a parent's own demise.
It might not be the best answer.
Right. Or an influencer.
Demise, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They're going to go find the answer online, and it might not be the best answer.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what did Steve Harvey say, right? We were watching something from him, and he said, you can't Google success, you can't Google experience.
Right.
He said, I have experience and I'm successful. And so there are things that they can't just go find out there very easily.
True.
And so it's important that people, that influencers, coaches, teachers, youth pastors, foster parents, everybody, if you have a teenager and you're a parent, you got to figure out, how am I going to play a role in helping to impart wisdom to these Gen Zers so that they're going out and, yes, being bold, being courageous, asking the hard questions, but proceeding in a way that is reflective of wisdom and not just a wild foolishness.
Man, that's so good. Yeah, and a lot of the data I've been reading on Gen Z is exactly that. When it comes to, I'm thinking, if I'm a business person and I've dealt with millennials before, I'd get really frustrated because I pour all this time into a millennial and they'd take off on me for a better opportunity, right? Whereas with Gen Z, it's different. This is the data that I'm reading anyways. With Gen Z, when they get that personal mentorship, someone pouring in, they stay for the long haul because they value relationship, they value trust, and when they feel that person's poured into them, that's what creates that sense of stability.
Yes.
And they want to build together.
Hey,
they don't want to take off for a golden opportunity. They want to build something.
And I can't wait to see them enter the workforce and to see some of these corporations have to, in fact, change the way that they're doing things. Because they're going to say, we're not going to work for you. You have to care about doing social good and not just the bottom line.
Yeah,
and I hope it wrecks the whole damn system.
Well, they already saw what their parents did when their parents sold out. What happened in 2008? No one was cutting a check for people on corporate America who were working, who lost their rear ends with all of that stuff. It was the corporate fat cat bankers on Wall Street that got the money. What about the everyday guy? This is where the Tea Party movement came from. This is why people can't understand, why is Bernie Sanders so popular?
Yep.
What were we reading the information about millennials? They have like 2% or 3% of wealth, whereas compared to generations before, it was like in the 20s or.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Absolutely.
We've basically turned the millennials and the generations after them into serfs.
Yep.
Right.
And whether you agree with Bernie or not, right? I'm not
for
that
sure,
guy,
for
you know
sure.
what I mean, I'm not there. I'm not on
but the populism that
right.
Bernie's on.
Absolutely. But the point is that he's a very clear example that young people are resonating with this message that says we're not just going to accept the status quo.
Yep.
We want something that is going to bring about some real radical change, and we want to be able to have a voice. Yeah, we want something different.
You're either going to do it for us or we're going to take it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as we wrap this thing up, last question I have for you. We'll see how long it goes because we like to talk.
Yep.
What would you say to a Gen Zer or an influencer looking to be successful in business?
Yeah. So I think there's several things. One, I would tell them, stop trying to figure out how to have all the right answers right now, because you're not going to have all the right answers, and you're going to have to get out and make mistakes and get slapped in the mouth by life in order to learn certain things. And so go take a chance. You will never, ever, ever have a higher risk tolerance or threshold than when you're young. And so if you're 21, 22, whatever, or if you are interacting with these Gen Zers that are super young, tell them to go take risk.
Yep.
Go take risk. $40,000, $50,000 in debt or whatever the case is. Like, if you were going to be cool with them taking on debt in order to go get a degree that they don't need, then don't hold them back and taking a little bit on if they want to go start a business.
Right.
Let them go try. And I'm not advocating for taking on debt or whatever the case is, but there's a lot of things that they can go out there and do, right? Let them go take risks. They have their whole life ahead of them. And so let them do that. I would tell the Gen Zer, I would tell them you need to become really self-aware. You need to taste a lot of things, right? And this is borrowing from all of the Gary Vee advice that shaped the way that I operate, right? Become self-aware. Figure out what you love. And especially if you can figure out an intersection between what you love and what you're good at, that is where you can have some real happiness doing something. That can be super fulfilling and you can excel in that space. Taste a lot of things. You got to try a lot of stuff in order to figure out what you actually want to do. It took me a long time to figure out, okay, I think that my calling is to go and to work with nonprofits. It took me a while, right? And I had 3 years of trying every kind of marketing thing ever. I went from bro marketer to super ethical, marketer. And I mean, I swung the whole kind of gamut. And so it took a while to do that. I would tell them to be patient. Like, there is no rush. There's nothing that says that you have to be successful tomorrow. Stop caring about what everybody else is saying or thinks about you. Stand on your own 2 feet and figure out, what do you want to do? And also I would tell them is that desire inside of you to go and do something that's about more than money. I'm telling you, it doesn't profit anyone to gain the whole world just to lose their soul in the end.
Man,
and
that's
so ask the big questions, ask the hard stuff, go out and build something, even if it doesn't seem like it's the right money move to make. Go out and do it. And also I would tell them to remind yourself, if it was easy, everyone would go and do it. It's not easy to be an entrepreneur. It's hard as hell.
It is.
But I'm telling you, I would rather be grinding and struggling to build something that I care about than giving all of my time away and signing on a dotted line to say I'm worth less than what I feel like I'm actually worth, to go work for a company where I'm just a cog in a wheel and they don't care about me or any of the social good that I want to do anyways.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things that you often talk about is hedging against regret.
Man, that's real. So absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. So I hedge everything against regret. My biggest fear is to be 90 years old. Wife's passed away already. Kids grown, maybe live in another state because they're out pursuing their dreams. And I'm a guy who's alone in my house, or, maybe I'm wearing diapers by that time and I got to be in a care facility, right? But I don't want to be looking myself in the mirror one day filled with all of the regrets of not going out and trying to take the leap, to do the hard thing. Like, I want to be able to look back on my life and say, I didn't waste what God gave me, and I didn't waste who God made me.
That's good, man.
I didn't waste my life. I used it well to bring glory and fame and honor to God. And also I used it well to care about people. And so hedge everything against that. Play the long game, right? And in a lot of ways, life is a vapor and it's short, but in a lot of ways, you got time.
Yeah.
And so
when you say play the long game, in my mind, I hear 2 things. I'm a young guy. I'm in a job that's dead end, and it seems like I can't see any room for progress. And when I hear play the long game, I could be tempted to hear stay there forever, right? But when I hear play the long game in the context of what you're saying is, no. And this is why I think ultimately another value would have to be happiness.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're in a position that you're unhappy, the long game isn't play the long game and stay unhappy for a long time.
Sure.
But the long game would be, nope, this isn't it. Keep going until you find that sweet spot.
Absolutely.
Right? So the long game would be once you find that happiness or once you find that thing or whatever that is, regardless of what the economic incentive or the kind of reputation it gives you because of it, the happiness is on the inside, knowing, like you said, you can look at yourself in the mirror, you can go to bed at night,
absolutely,
knowing that you're not a sellout.
Yeah, and you're right. When I say play the long game, what I don't mean by that is just stay doing something that you hate forever and hope that it gets better.
Right. Hope's not a strategy.
No, absolutely not. And hard work doesn't guarantee success either.
Right.
Right. And so you've got to figure out, all right, hard work doesn't guarantee success. Hope's not a strategy. And so I've got to go and like think really hard about what I'm going to go do. I got to go figure out what is the plan for me to get from A to Z, right? And to get here. And you've got to be willing to take a leap somewhere. And I think life is about figuring out how to navigate through two extremes, right? If your metric is always, I don't ever want to do anything that's hard, that's the wrong way to think about stuff. Okay.
Right.
It is. And I don't want people to mistake happiness with difficulty, right? Just because you're happy doing it doesn't necessitate that it's going to be an easy thing to do. And I'm yet to figure out this whole idea of, well, if you do what you love, then you'll never work a day in your life. Like, come on now. There are plenty of days where things are difficult and where it's like,
you're always going to work.
Absolutely.
But better to work at something you love.
Absolutely.
Right?
But, and that's the reality there. And so you just got these extremes. Like, how do I figure out how to do what I love and provide for my family?
That's so good, man.
And so, but no one has all the right answers. No one does. There is no kind of playbook. There's no, even when you look at the scriptures, right? You have a tremendous amount of freedom to go and choose your vocation and what you want to do. I don't wake up in the morning and then, God's like, hey, go drive and get breakfast first and then go this and then go, right? I got to go live my life governed by the things that I think are right and good and true. And so what I would say, is be willing to take the leap. Don't hold GenZers back. Let them go. Let them go and try things. Help guide them with wisdom. And this is messy. All of it is. There's no clean-cut path, but just the same old stuff is not going to work. Man, and they're coming to the table asking a lot of different things. And so, I want to see that happen. And huge shout out to Real Talk, right? You guys are saying, hey, we want to be at the forefront of equipping people that of influence to engage this next generation, right? And you're giving them the equipping skills, you're giving them insight into what's happening, and then also providing a community. So anybody out there that has interacted with Jordan or John, if you're watching this, but you're not a part of the Facebook group, go join the group. Get in, engage. Like, this is where it's at. You guys have the potential to easily become the biggest group that is Gen Z centric on the internet. And there's no reason why you couldn't.
Right.
And so
that's what we're aiming for.
Absolutely.
Why not?
Yep.
If not us, then who?
Yeah.
If not right now, then when?
That's
good stuff.
Real. Right? And I wish we had the quote up in front of us, but be the unreasonable person, right? The reasonable people aren't the ones who change the world.
Yep. That's right.
It's the people that are...
man tries to fit into the confines of the world. The unreasonable man is constantly bashing against the confines
so
of the
all
world.
change is dependent on the unreasonable man.
All change is dependent on that. So be radical, be crazy, have impossible...
Be a douche, though.
Right. I mean, sometimes you need a little violence in your life. I'm just saying. But
the philosophy of Dre,
no doubt.
The rod and the staff.
But as we kind of tie this thing together, as we always do, with a little bit of Christian perspective, think about this reality that, obviously we're Christians. We believe that Jesus has saved us, and He's done this through His life, death, His resurrection, and in faith we receive that. But we're still here.
Right.
It's not like we believed in Jesus and then all of a sudden we disappeared and went to heaven. We're here right now, and we're living in between the time where He is left and in between the time where He returns. And what has He called us to do now? It's to care for people, and help people flourish and help them see the same thing that we see, which is the gospel, right?
Absolutely.
And so now we're living these lives where we're doing everything we possibly can to use all the gifts, all the talents, all the skills, all the abilities we've been given to make an impact on this world, and to give people the tools and the skills that they need to make an impact on this world, right? And so, like, I'm not just going to share with somebody the good news, but if they're homeless, I'm going to feed them.
Absolutely.
If they're a young person, I'm going to give them the tools that they need to be successful. If they're an influencer and I have information that's going to help them, I'm going to give it to them. And so anchoring everything we do, the ultimate truth that allows us to create what we're creating and to build what we're building is this reality that we believe, like, that God has given us this life for a purpose, and it's to use the gifts and talents that we have to glorify Him in this world, to build beautiful things that take care of people and help people flourish and help people pursue their dreams.
Absolutely.
And all those different types of things. And so that's why we do what we do, man.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, earlier you were talking a little bit. I know that Doulos has shifted a little bit. You've taken on this nonprofit status. I think some of that, or you're pursuing that. Some of that has come as a result of your work with nonprofits like ourselves and some of the other ones. So could you speak onto that a little bit as we wrap up here, just some of that with your Christian worldview and how that...
Yeah, so I mean, I got, like I said, a deep-rooted desire to actually do good, right? And to care about people. And the scriptures say the two greatest commandments is to love God and then love your neighbor like you love yourself. And for me, I needed to be loved in more ways than just someone coming and sharing Christ to me. Right? I needed someone to come alongside me and help me in some practical ways, right? I mean, if you want to get real practical, right? I'm Black. I married a white woman, and there are all type of things that she had already experienced and done in life that I had no category for. And so my wife was able to help me in a lot of practical ways, right? I met people who weren't from where I was from, who didn't come from where I came from, and they were living different lives practically, right? And so even getting the bank job for me, no one who comes from where I come from knows what life insurance is. You know, Cass in the Hood got life insurance at all, right? I didn't know anything about how taxes really worked. I just knew that they take money out of my paycheck before I get it, and I don't have no say-so in that, right? I didn't know how to change that. I didn't know anything about investing. I didn't know nothing about a retirement, nothing. And so when I worked at the bank, I got exposed to a lot of things, right? I figured out how mortgages worked, all of that kind of stuff. And so my point is, like, I had help there. And so as I talk specifically to this idea of wanting to do good for people, because I had a lot of good done for me, what that's turned is from me saying, hey, I actually want to take this incarnational approach, right? And working with you guys.
What do you mean by incarnational?
Yeah, so becoming like the people that you want to help.
Kind of like Jesus did, right?
Absolutely. And so what I've decided is that Doulos is, we're going to kind of put the for-profit side of what we're doing on hold, put it on park for now, not get rid of it, because there's going to be other opportunities that come up with that in the future, but going this route of starting Doulos movement. Okay. And specifically, it's the environment or the context where I can take all of the brand development, social media audience engagement, and specifically marketing techniques that I learned from my several years here doing digital marketing specifically, and say, hey, how can I take those and apply them to these startup and mid-sized nonprofits so that they have a real chance to become a viable organization that can last and make a real difference.
Yeah, it's like a really small percentage of the ones that actually make it, right?
Absolutely. And then, I mean, here's the reality, dude. 54% of nonprofits don't have a content marketing strategy. Wow. And if you have ever volunteered for a nonprofit, or if you've started a nonprofit or you work for one and you don't know what a content marketing strategy is, that proves my point.
Right.
Right.
So if you run a nonprofit right now,
absolutely,
and these terms seem
if you don't know what
out of the ordinary.
Yeah, if you don't know what a theory of change is, right? Over half of nonprofits either don't know what a theory of change is or how it's supposed to drive what they're doing in their organization, which is outrageous to me, because ultimately we don't need a business plan, right? We need to know, how are you going to bring about change? And then what are you going to do to actually measure that change?
Right.
How do you know if you're actually being effective? And so, I mean, there's a lot of things in the nonprofit space that really need to be flipped on their head, right? How the average person thinks about giving to a nonprofit, how we think about overhead and, well, I don't want to give unless it goes straight to the people because, I don't want to pay the CEO's salary, even though, like, in all reality, when people start nonprofits, they're starting a business, right? Being a 501c3 is your tax classification. You still started a business. And in order for us to be able to go and do the kind of good that nonprofits, in fact, could be doing, they have to be allowed to be more entrepreneurial than for-profit entrepreneurs. The for-profit sector has not solved all of the world's problems. There are a ton of problems that exist out there, right? The poverty rate in America has been the same for 50 years.
Right.
And so we got to stop handcuffing nonprofits and allow them to actually be able to be competitive enough to go and make real change. And you're talking about people who said, I will devote my life to trying to do good and solve problems for people. Let's stop holding them back with our archaic ways that we think as donors. And let's actually see ourselves as people who are investing when we give to a nonprofit. And we're looking for social return on investment. And the reality is this, you got to acquire talent if you want to build a successful nonprofit. That means you have to pay people, right? You have to take risks in order to be innovative. But people are like, nonprofits can't take risks right now. I'll get off my soapbox in a second, but this is important, right? Well, I can't take risks because it's other people's money. No one's giving to a nonprofit out of like the money that they need to feed their children, right? No one's like, I gave to this nonprofit, now I can't pay my rent, right? Like, give me a break. It's discretionary funds.
Exactly.
Right? Giving to nonprofits is representative of that we all have more than what we actually need. And so let them go and take risks and be radical and do something crazy. So if you give to Real Talk, ask the right questions.
That's interesting because I'm just thinking about a for-profit. And when I invest in a company, I want them to go crazy because I want them to make me a bunch of money.
Right.
So I want them to do some crazy radical stuff that no one else has done so they make money that nobody else makes. So I invest this money into this company and I'm hoping that they do some crazy stuff so they make a massive return. I should be doing the same thing with a nonprofit, but it should be social, like you said, right?
Absolutely.
And I think what's brilliant about, just speaking from our own experience, what you've really given us the ability to do by setting up the social media platforms, the digital platforms, really taking advantage of those, is to go directly to our audience with our message.
Yes.
We've been so dependent for so long upon big money donors finding the right people to give. And, money has not been exactly just growing off a tree since 2008. And a lot of the people who used to give haven't given. And just the economy and things change. But what's really important, what you've shown us, and I think what for a lot of nonprofits out there to hear, if you can go directly to your audience and they can see the value that you're bringing, they can see it.
Absolutely.
I mean, you got your whole audience at that point becoming part of your team.
Dude,
then the give is no big deal.
Right. And if you're not telling stories as a nonprofit, and nonprofits are always looking for stuff for free, but then they don't utilize free platforms like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn, right?
YouTube.
They're free. Yeah. It doesn't cost you money to go post a video on YouTube, right? And to tag it rightly or title it correctly, create the right thumbnail, nothing. And you can do it just like I said with a cell phone earlier, right? And so you got these free platforms that are out there, but you're right. The best way to go out and build this is stop relying on a big donor that you're beholden to. Stop having to rely solely on the government for grants, right? But actually go out and build your organization on the back of having given a tremendous amount of value to people and really told your stories well so that you can invite people to champion and to participate in what you're doing.
Man, that's so great. And so this Christian worldview, really, that you have from the beginning, we talked about how it's just shaped your life, and it's gotten to this point where it's still shaping your life as a business owner.
Absolutely.
Where you've made this radical decision, to do this. And it's like you've been radical from the beginning. You're just staying radical.
Absolutely. And to shift from the for-profit to the nonprofit side, to give up a certain amount of control and to say, I'm going to build something that belongs to the people, that's where it's at, right? And you're going to see more people, I think, doing this over time. The days of waiting until you're successful to finally be able to do good, I'm done with that. I'm going to go and do good now.
Wow.
And I'm going to figure out how to make a good living and survive and all of those things.
That's so good,
it's possible.
Dope. Like I told you, I thought it was going to take us a little bit to land the plane. I think we're actually landing it now. Coming in.
Just under an hour.
Real Talk Phoenix Podcast, episode 19.
Yes, sir.
In the books, RLTKPHX. Thank you, Dre.
Yes, sir.
Before we finish, please let us know where we can find you online.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything at Doulos Movement. So if you go on Twitter, You go on Facebook, you go LinkedIn, you go Instagram at Doulos Movement, MVMT. You're about to see all type of content coming out.
And how do you spell Doulos?
DOULOS.
Awesome.
And then MVMT at Doulos Movement. Join the movement.
All right.
Yes, sir. There we go. RLTKPHX. You'll find us at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube.
There you go. Got it.
All at RLTKPHX. We really appreciate you guys listening in. Remember, this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end. We want this to be fodder for you to continue to dialogue and think through. Comment, like, share. We want to hear from you. We want to continue the conversation. We love you guys. We appreciate you influencers out there. Let's keep this thing going.
Yep.
Peace.
Peace.
Later.